Recording in progress.
We are back in session following a study session on a Parks Funding Exploratory Committee recommendation for a potential park ballot measure and the review of a draft recreation and aquatic center feasibility study. We are now at item 4 on our agenda, honors and proclamations. Our proclamation tonight is recognizing Nowruz and support for Iranian American Community Proclamation. I would like anybody in the audience who is affected by that to come to the center here, and Councilmember Falcone is going to read the proclamation.
We're not taking picture with him.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm going to be reading a proclamation of the City of Kirkland recognizing March 20th, 2023 as Nowruz in Kirkland and proclaiming support for the Iranian American community. Whereas Nowruz, meaning new day, is a cherished and ancient solar New Year celebration that marks the northern vernal equinox and the first day of spring, and has been celebrated for over 3,000 years by people from many different cultural and religious backgrounds, including Turkish, Persian, Kurdish, Azeri, Afghan, and many other communities. And whereas the Festival of Nowruz promotes the values of peace and solidarity and symbolizes a time of renewal and community, marking a departure from the trials of the previous year and bringing hope for the new year. And whereas the city recognizes the cultural and historical significance of Nowruz, excuse me, and expresses appreciation for the contributions of the Iranian American community and all those communities who celebrate Nowruz in Kirkland and throughout the East Side. And whereas the values of peace, solidarity, renewal, community, and hope are particularly relevant during this time of struggle for the Iranian people in their pursuit of justice and freedom, particularly for women and girls. And whereas in September 2022, a young Kurdish Iranian woman, Masha Gina Amini, died after she was arrested and detained for an alleged violation of Iran's strict dress code for women. And her death sparked widespread protests in Iran, accompanied by the rallying cry of woman, life, freedom. And whereas the city supports the Iranian American community in Kirkland as they amplify the voice of the Iranian people in Iran, chanting woman, life, freedom, translated from the Kurdish slogan of Jin, Jiyan, Azadi. And whereas the City Council has worked to demonstrate a deliberate and intentional effort to create a Kirkland where everybody belongs through the approval of resolutions R 5240 in February of 2017 and R 5434 in August 2020, and the adoption of a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging 5-year roadmap in July 2022 that identifies several actions to ensure that Kirkland is a safe, inclusive, and welcoming place for all people. And whereas, as it does with all cultural communities in Kirkland, the city seeks to develop an ongoing collaboration with the Iranian American community and others who celebrate Nowruz in its effort to raise awareness of and to promote a deeper understanding, acceptance, and respect for the diversity of cultures represented in Kirkland. Now, therefore, Mayor Penny Sweet, on behalf of the Kirkland City Council, does hereby proclaim March 20th, 2023 as Nowruz in Kirkland, further proclaims support for the Iranian American community during the movement for justice and freedom for women and other people, and condemns the use of violence to enforce policies that discriminate against women and other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Sui. Thank you so much for this council. I want to extend my deepest gratitude for your unwavering support of our community and your dedicated staff, especially David, Erica, all of whom have been very supportive, James, all of you who have been very supportive throughout this process, and for officially recognizing Nowruz through this proclamation. Nowruz New Year is a time of celebration for over 300 million people across the world with different religious, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds, and it symbolizes time of renewal and hope for the future with the arrival of spring. This year, Nowruz has been bittersweet for many of us, with the Zan Zindagi Azadi, the Women Life Freedom Movement, happening in Iran and people's fight for freedom in Iran and Afghanistan. We mourn our fallen sisters and brothers who courageously sacrificed their lives for a better future and stand in solidarity with the political prisoners and people who continue to fight for their freedoms and rights. We also see parallels between what's happening in Iran and right here in our adopted home of America, and how they're connected when we see our rights, women's rights of bodily autonomy being taken away. And yet we continue to fight for what is just. We should also recognize that it is imperative that we continue amplifying the voices of the Iranian people who are doing the same, fighting for their freedom. I hope that this proclamation serves to strengthen the partnership between this council and the Iranian Americans who continue to contribute so much to Kirkland's thriving society and economy. And I wish everybody a very happy New Year. Nowruz Piruz. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I say a word? Please.
Okay.
Before you take a picture, I would like to thank all the officials here that this city is beautiful because of all the work you do, and I appreciate all of you. And supporting the Nowruz and Zan Zindagi Azadi, I really appreciate that. But today, my calling is all the diversity and all the diverse community that we have in our city, that they be celebrated just like this. We want to make sure that that diversity is continuously involved with the city of Kirkland and any other city as the volunteer work, because today I feel diversity that it brings is love and beauty to elevate our city, and America is what we need. So we can ask for anything from this council, but we need to roll our sleeves up and be part of the solution. Thank you for giving us the time for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
You are
Nice
good to
meeting
see
you.
you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Sui.
Thank you. Okay, this takes us to item number 5, communications and items from the audience. This is the time in our meeting when we normally hear from the public on matters that are not quasi-judicial or scheduled for a public hearing, of which there are none scheduled this evening. Please limit remarks to 3 minutes, and the council will receive up to 3 comments each on both sides of any issue. If you are present either in person or virtually and would like to address the council during this items from the audience period, please sign up using the online public comment instruction line or in person using the posted QR code. For those participating by phone, please dial *9 to be recognized. Community members will be called on in the order in which they signed up. Items from the audience is an important part of our business meeting, and we ask that everyone be treated with kindness and respect. We ask that you please not clap or applaud after a speaker or express your disagreement with a speaker. We want everyone in Kirkland to feel welcome expressing their viewpoints, regardless of content. Because they can be disruptive, signs and placards are also not allowed in council chambers during our meetings, regardless of their content. City Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor. We have 8 people signed up to speak this evening. The first 3 are Samantha St. John, Nassim Ghazanfari, Arazu Bagan, followed by Curtis Thompson.
Welcome, Ms. St. John.
Hello, Council. My name is Samantha St. John, and I am the outgoing CEO of the Kirkland Chamber of Commerce and Kirkland Chamber Foundation. So I am here tonight to just extend my appreciation to the city staff and to the council for my 10 years of being the Chamber CEO, and just thank you for your support, and please welcome Charisse Burgoyne into this position as she will fill the interim role as the Chamber interim CEO. And also just, it wouldn't be a council meeting with me without a reminder to please consider the small business community as you are making policies going forward, as I will not be here to talk about them anymore in this capacity. So I just wanted to thank you for 10 years, and several of you have actually been on the council the entire time that I've been CEO of the Chamber. So thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
The next speaker is Naseem Ghazanfari.
Welcome.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Ms. Mayor, and everybody here, council members. I'm not exactly ready to talk. I thought I'm the third person, but I'll try to be as quick as possible. I'm an Iranian-American woman, and I'm a mother. I'm a physician. I'm an immigrant, and I call America my second home, while my home country is back in Iran. I wanted to start my talk with saying, in the name of the God of the rainbow, because that's what reminds us of what's happening in Iran. Those are the words of a 9-year-old who was murdered by the Islamic Republic forces. It's hard to talk about those atrocities happening in my country during a big celebration, which is Nowruz, and just after you did a beautiful proclamation recognizing our holiday. This is our most cherished holiday, which was really difficult for us to celebrate this particular year because of everything happening back at home. Our family, even here, are not safe. We are also being threatened by arms of the Islamic Republic who live among us. And I just want you to be aware of that. And I would like to have meetings forward to talk to the mayor, to the council members, and we all learn about both Iranian culture and what's happening in our community in future. But I also want to thank you enormously for the steps you did in order to recognize Nowruz for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Arzu Bagan, followed by Curtis Thompson, then Bonnie McLeod.
Welcome, Arzu.
Hi, my name is Arzu Bagan. Thank you so much for City Mayor, City Councils, everyone. Recognition of that Nowruz is beautiful. It's a courage to our community. Thanks for Sahar for putting it all together. So I am a woman which find my community in the street literally at September 26, 2022, when Mahsa got killed by morality police in Iran, and this revolution just started. And since then, we've been in the street all this, like every single night for the first 2 months, and after that it is every week or every other week, in the rain, in the snow, in any condition. I'm so proud of my community, which is, we have the group or nonprofit organization called Voice of Iran. These young, beautiful young people are just working days and nights, and while we trying to be the voice of the voiceless is from Iran, trying to be the clearest voice from Iranian people. Also, culture, Nowruz is beautiful. We want to just save it, because Islamic regime, all they want to just destroy our culture, and this is part of their job. But this is not our biggest matter today. We are just losing beautiful kids every day. We want to just be the voice of the voiceless people who get killed. 9 years old, 12, 10. They have no limits. They put chemical attack their own school. That's the condition of my country. Although I really appreciate it, I want you to just hear that this is my passion, this is me, real me. Really appreciate that, but we want to get more connected, and then get more help to amplify their voice. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Curtis Thompson, followed by Bonnie McLeod and Scott Morris.
Is Mr. Thompson here?
He is.
Welcome, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. And thank you all, members of the council and Madam Mayor. I'm here to ask that those who are leaning in one direction or the other of the screening for people to live at the proposed sheltered housing La Quinta project understand that the people that we're wanting to help out there are more vulnerable than the average population. And they need to know, we need to know that extended security option, background checks, is there for their protection as much as the general community. I've served several years on multiple King County boards, the Veterans Advisory Board and the Levy Oversight Board, and learned a great deal about how people can thrive and do well in a safe environment. And this is one small element with no significant financial cost that I think we really have no choice. We really need to make certain that not just the general community, but especially the population living in a small, closed quarter place like this, that they can feel safe and that they can benefit from a helping hand up and maybe be among those who become self-sufficient because they've had a safe place to live and work. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Bonnie McLeod, followed by Scott Morris and Ken McKenzie. Then will be Joe Kunzler.
Welcome, Ms. McLeod.
In spring 2019, the City of Kirkland announced a pilot program named Summer Sundays on Park Lane. It proved to be a total failure, and halfway through the summer, it was consolidated to just Park Lane West. Then in 2020, the city named it Evenings on Park Lane and framed the closure as helping businesses. For 2021, you continued the closure, allowing businesses to expand into the street due to COVID. At no time did you ask the retail businesses, can they expand into the street? When COVID restrictions were lifted and the restaurants went back to full capacity inside, their kitchens and their staff didn't allow for expansion into the street. That's where we are today. So now here in 2023, you insist on studying this further. You have all been provided documentation that reflects 100% of the businesses on Park Lane are against this closure. Yet when the question of how do the businesses and property owners feel comes up, no one speaks up and says they're against it. They're against closing to vehicular traffic. You hired a consultant and spent $75,000 to study this further. The business owners and property owners are allotted a grand total of 2.5 hours of the consultant's time. That hardly feels like you want to understand the position of the very people that are investing in Kirkland. I have asked that a letter from our land use attorney, who represents a group of property owners, be shared with you. Can you pass that out to the
Derek, you want to?
It's quite clear the action of the action of closing the street would rise to a level of an unlawful taking. Please read this letter carefully, as he is clear that closing the street will have legal consequences for the city. I'm not sure why you all feel you know more about what is best for business on Park Lane. No one visited the business owners when this started to ask how things were going on the street. You completed construction in 2015, and since that year, you have not maintained anything on the street. The 4 years of pilot programs, you never looked back to say, how did it go? Has anyone asked Washington Federal how they're affected every night when the street is closed? Grubhub and Uber Eats jam their parking lot, their private parking lot, and there's no turnaround. It took one employee 15 minutes to get out of their own parking lot. Has anyone spoken to Waste Management? Garbage storage and collection has been a problem for over 30 years. There is not sufficient alley space for garbage today. Deliveries are vital to business. Large produce and restaurant supply deliveries are already a headache. Then add UPS and Amazon. These drivers cannot deliver without access. After Bothel's street closure in their downtown was used as an example and we were told how wonderful it was, we went and did our own research. They closed their street. They asked for their street to be closed because transit ran up and down. They don't consider the doorways on that closed street their front doors. Their fronts are on the backside where they have over 500 parking spaces. Please go look for yourself. It's quite a different situation than we have in Kirkland. Please respect the business community in
McLeod.
Kirkland and give them credit for knowing what's
Ms.
best for
McLeod,
their
I'm
businesses.
sorry, your time is up. Thank you.
Mayor, the next speaker is Scott Morris, followed by Ken McKenzie, Joe Kunzler, and Phil Allen.
Welcome, Mr. Morris.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. My name is Scott Morris. I am a resident of the Finn Hill neighborhood and also a participant in the PFEC process that you just discussed. I wanted to say, I think on behalf of all the PFEC members, that we really appreciate the effort that the staff put into informing us and providing a very good background for the many issues that are associated with that park ballot measure. It was really a lot of work and we appreciated it. I certainly did. I thought it was a good presentation in the study session, but I do have one point that I would like to raise for the council's consideration. And that is that the 86,000 square foot Houghton option should be also one of the options for North Kirkland Community Center. The Houghton 86,000 option has a rec pool, a separate lap pool, and 2 basketball courts. The fact that there's a separate lap pool and a separate rec pool, I think is very important. The water temperature of the two is different. They have different purposes. And the 74,000 square foot option for North Kirkland has a combined lap and rec pool, which I think is a very different type of feature. And for several of us, I think on the PFEC, maybe many of us, I think there was a lot of confusion between the issue of location and the issue of the types of facilities that would be available at each location. And I think if you want good data from the community, you should have an apples to apples comparison. In other words, community members should be able to consider the same type of facility in North Kirkland as would be offered in Houghton. So that's just a suggestion that I hope will be taken up by the staff and that OPSIS will be asked to provide some cost information on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ken McKenzie, followed by Joe Kunzler and Phil Allen.
Welcome, Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you. What are the odds that my PowerPoint presentation can work here? No, there's no.
Oh, I wish you had emailed that to me, Ken.
No?
That's how it works these days? Used to just be able to plug it in. Oh dear. Okay. Hi. Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and the council, thank you for giving me this time. And I have to second, it was a real honor to be on PFEC. And I think we accomplished a great deal. I also think there were a number of loose ends. And I'd like to support the idea that the Houghton location and the North Kirkland location need to have similar capabilities in order to judge. And in particular, the North Kirkland location needs a better facility design. It just seemed like the North Kirkland facility design was hobbled in some way. Sammamish has a wonderful facility that everybody should look at. 69,000 square feet, so it's quite a bit smaller than any of the Houghton locations and also than the North Kirkland location, and yet it has a lap pool, a 6-lane lap pool, a recreation pool, and 3 basketball courts, as well as a whole bunch of exercise facilities and everything else you'd ever want in 69,000 square feet. And in 2016, it cost about $35 million to build. So it was a lot cheaper as well. That would provide the extra money that's needed for land moving and things like that at North Kirkland. When I started on PFEC, I was convinced that Houghton was the location to use. And through discussions with the people on PFEC, especially people from Finn Hill, you know how troublesome they are. They explained to me that getting from Finn Hill to Houghton Park and Ride at rush hour in order to drop off or pick up a kid is really, really hard. And I became convinced that a central location where transit is much better than it is at Houghton is ideal. So we really need that North Kirkland location explored and the right facilities there so that we're not looking at a hobbled facility against a really grand one and getting confused about location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is virtual, and his name is Joe Kunzler.
Welcome,
Hi,
Mr.
friends.
Kunzler.
And welcome, and thank you for having me. Joe Kunzler here. I'm going to be brief as it seems there's a lot of good souls winning the sortie this evening. A couple of thoughts. First, I understand that there's been some problems with some communication between the council and the county executive about a homeless shelter, and I want to register for the record my support for Councilmember Toby Nixon's concerns. I find it very concerning that the county executive would not be fully forthcoming. I know Jonathan Cho, CHOE, is documenting all of this, so just want to add my voice in support. Second thing is that last January, you had a troubled individual in Alex Zimmerman address you, and I've meant to reach out to you ever since then. When someone comes before you, generally, you're not supposed to let them continue after they announce their campaigning or that they're in a campaign. I just don't think that's a good practice, and I filed several Public Disclosure Commission complaints about Mr. Zimmerman and his conduct. And I also don't appreciate at all in any shape, way, or form the way he addresses you as a council. I happen to consider one of your council members a open government hero of mine, so I take it extremely personally. Though that's pretty much all my remarks. I want to make sure that everyone has time to talk tonight. Thank you for your public service.
Thank you, Mr. Kunzler.
The next speaker is Phil Allen.
Welcome, Mr. Allen.
Hi, am I audible?
You are.
Excellent. Hi, Mayor Sweet, Deputy Mayor Arnold, Kirkland City Council. Thank you for having me here tonight. Along with some other folks who are in the audience, I had the privilege of being on the PFEC. And I actually wanted to zoom into something particular in the PFEC that may have been in your detailed packets, but was certainly not spoken out in the report. There's been mention made of our tour to the Sammamish facility. And just like Mr. McKenzie brought up a few minutes ago, they have a really nice facility. It's about 69,000 square feet. They did relate to us, a number of us, a large enough number, I feel good about saying it, that they actually also rent some additional space. So they certainly don't have a great quantity more facility than they're currently using. I'm sure there's some spare capacity, not a huge amount. The population in Sammamish is about 66,000 people. Population in Kirkland, I'm sure all of you are aware, is about 91,000 people, is expected to grow to maybe as high as 140,000 over the next 20 to 25 years. So I am looking at kind of those current numbers and saying if there's 91, 92,000 now, to have an equivalent level of facility, it'd be something where 95, 96, 97,000 square feet. And to plan for a future, it would be something more like 140 or 150,000 total square feet. This doesn't all have to be built at once. It doesn't all have to be built in one ballot measure. And I actually, in my own mind, in 20 years, an additional facility would be built to help shore up that amount. So that's all kind of factual math, dry stuff. But for my own recommendations, I would give up size on facility to get 2 different facilities in different locations, with this idea that it's easy for a person to vote for a pool, aquatics facility, wellness center near them, but to vote against the cost of an aquatics facility pool that's far away from them. The other thing I would do is I would give up the fanciness of the facility, and I do not know the construction grade that the proposals are at, but I would give up fanciness of the facility in order to get more size, in order to get a better footprint. And if there's a desire to make it fancier later, it's much easier to change the finishes than it is to do an expansion. So there's just a couple of my thoughts, and I thought I would share them with you. I know it's a hard problem because I was in the PFEC room and I don't have access to half the information or concerns that the 7 of you would have. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your consideration. And I look forward to hearing both the council direction and the future for PFEC and the ballot measure as a total.
Thank you.
We have one additional sign up. Greg Young is the next speaker.
Welcome, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. I'll go on record saying I'm not perfectly prepared for this, but I'll try my best. I wanted to take a moment to comment on the supportive housing initiative and most recently the topic of background checks. I've, as a member of the community, tried my best to engage, follow through the process, learn about what's going on. I'm excited for Kirkland to be welcoming and create this opportunity. There are many members of the greater community and the county who can need this help and will benefit from it, and that's great. I do think that the opportunity that can be provided to those individuals needs to be put in consideration with the community safety. And I get concerned that sometimes that's being not the top priority. And I urge and beg of the council to really keep that in mind. As I mentioned, I've been trying to follow and engage and learn. I know there's been many concerns shared around safety of the community. I do think there has been, and I will acknowledge some of that seems to have been heard, and there's been progress made. So I definitely want to acknowledge that. On the background check topic, the first I heard of that being a recommendation to not be included at all was just about 2 weeks ago. Maybe I missed something, I don't know, but that was the first time I'd heard of that. And since if it has been a clear mandate from King County as one of their top 2 priorities, it just seems a bit evasive that it would have come about this late in the game. If that was 2 weeks ago and there's a final vote on that tonight, it seems a bit misleading of the public to have this come through at the very end. Again, if that was made clear earlier and somehow I missed it, I guess my fault, but in talking with others in the community, they feel the same way. And background checks, I'm not an expert there, but I'm a Little League coach and a volunteer, and I go to the City of Kirkland's website, and I'm required to submit to a criminal background check to engage with the city that way. I believe it's Alliance 2020 is the provider. I believe the Washington State Patrol provides background checks. I don't know if the City of Kirkland has had issues or complaints about, but it's confusing why it would be so concerning that cannot be considered to be, as a point of information and consideration in this process. But for other places across the community, across Kirkland, it's a requirement. So it's just confusing. It feels misleading, and I would urge the council to have a thorough discussion and really think through that. There's many other concerns, but that's the top one for. I would appreciate your consideration on today. And I think the comment the gentleman made earlier about the safety of the residents is important to consider as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have no other speakers signed up.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the council during this items from the audience period? Seeing none, I will declare this items from the audience period closed. That takes us to item 8, our consent calendar. Before we have a motion, I'd like to ask Deputy Mayor Arnold to present the audit of accounts.
Presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped item 7. Sorry about that. Item 7 is special presentations, the King County Crisis Care Center's levy. City Manager.
Okay, thank you very much. I couldn't get my mute off fast enough, so I appreciate coming back to that. So we have a special presentation for the council tonight. King County has placed Proposition 1, the Crisis Care Center levy, on the April 25th ballot. Kelly Ryder, the Government Relations Manager from King County Department of Community and Human Services, is going to make a presentation and answer any questions. And then following that, Diana Hart, who's our Government Relations Manager for Kirkland, is going to ask if the council's interested in a resolution of support at a following council meeting. Thank you.
Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. It's nice to be with you all this evening, and I'm happy to be presenting on the Crisis Care Center's levy that will be before the voters in April. I just want to make a quick clarification that I am here in my official county capacity, and so I am happy to present here on an educational fact basis the information that will be before the voters, and nothing that I will be saying will be trying to support one position or the other. As a context for the presentation, I also want to clarify when we talk about behavioral health, In this levy, broadly in our region, in our state, in our country, behavioral health really means both mental health and substance use disorder healthcare. And so sometimes we get some questions about whether behavioral health is just mental health. It is meant to be that comprehensive care that we know many of our folks in the community need. All right, so when the executive proposed the Crisis Care Centers levy back in September of last year, the levy was proposed to address three main problems. One is that many of us take for granted that in the physical health care sphere, we can at any time call 911, get an ambulance, go to an urgent care and emergency room at any time that we might break a bone, our child needs stitches, we fall and we need help from a doctor. We do not have this for behavioral health care. There is no urgent care that anyone can just walk into at any time right now, anywhere in King County. The second main problem that the Crisis Care Centers levy is intended to address is that our mental health residential capacity specifically has been drastically reduced over the last 5 years. We have lost 1/3 of our beds. And we know that especially as our population grows, as our behavioral health needs as a region grow, that we need to be able to restore this capacity. And the last issue that this is intended to address is that in order for any of this to work, it will take people to treat people. And so addressing the unsustainability of our workforce, both in the fact that it does not represent currently the diverse population that needs behavioral health care in our region, but also the fact that we have too many vacancies right now in our behavioral health workforce needs to be addressed in order for us to be successful. And so we set out to look at what in the behavioral health crisis system the Crisis Care Center levy could address. When we think about a crisis system, both the federal government, state government, and now your regional government at King County have incorporated this three-pillar model. First, that you need someone to talk to. You need someone like the 911 system, and in Washington State, we have now incorporated the 988 system, as well as what we have traditionally had in the regional crisis line, where you do have someone to call if you need behavioral health emergency care. The second pillar then is someone to respond. And so in many places in King County right now, you can call the regional crisis line and the mobile crisis team is able to respond. We certainly need more capacity there. And I think the RACER model here is also intended to be very responsive to this idea of someone needing to respond. We need more folks to respond, but perhaps more important for this levy is that even when we do have someone responding, there's no place for that individual to go when they need care. And so the Crisis Care Center sets out to be that someplace to go. And you all in Kirkland are very familiar with this idea given the announcement about the Connection site a few weeks ago. So the Crisis Center levy would then set out to create three specific investment areas. One, to create 5 new regional crisis care centers across King County. 2, to preserve and restore the dramatic loss of residential treatment beds. You'll see here that in 2018, there were 355 beds, and by last year, there were only 244 of those beds available. And lastly, growing the behavioral health workforce in a way that represents the needs of our growing behavioral health client base. And you can see here at the bottom our representatives of member providers of behavioral health care are now representing that they have doubled vacancies in their staff that they've been unable to fill. So we'll start off with just a little bit of detail about each of these 3 components of the Crisis Care Centers levy. The first being the paramount purpose, which is to build a network of 5 crisis care centers. You'll see here a map, and that is because the ballot measure ordinance that is before voters now would propose 4 different regions. One you'll see in the north zone that nicely carves out the city of Kirkland there in the orange area. And then we also have a zone for Seattle, the east zone, and the south zone. So the ballot measure ordinance would require that there be a crisis care center in each of these 4 geographies, and then that there would be a 5th crisis care center in one place across the county specifically intended for youth. Next, what is a crisis care center? So the crisis care centers would provide 4 specific types of care. First, that it provides that urgent care model, that at any time you can come in with a family member, you can come in yourself, or a first responder could drop someone off that needs immediate access to urgent care. And that individual would be able to access care when their traditional provider might be closed, evening, weekends, or any time throughout the week, and just be able to access that care clinician. But the next step is for folks that may need a little bit more time to stabilize, they need a little bit more support, and that's for folks that stay at the 23 hours in an observation type unit. This is a model that's gotten a lot of attention from folks that have traveled to Arizona, certainly Connections being one of the providers nationally that already provides this model of care, but we do not have it right now here in King County. And then the third piece of that is for folks who do need much longer to stay and to stabilize, to be able to be supported, make sure that they have a proper diagnosis, medication, whatever those needs might be, and they could stay up to 14 days. All three of these types of care are intended to be voluntary. These are for individuals who are ready to access care and who can engage in those services. We do know that at times folks need involuntary treatment, and for those folks, we will also be citing our designated crisis responders who have the state responsibility to evaluate folks for involuntary care right there at the Crisis Care Center. Another benefit of citing our DCRs at the site is that right now, all of those DCRs that the county employs are cited in the county offices in Seattle. That means that if someone were to call from Kirkland, from Enumclaw, from SeaTac, they have to drive out from their Seattle office, drive back to their Seattle office, and you can imagine how that stacks up in order to be responsive. By being able to cite our DCRs across the county in these 5 crisis care centers, we're going to be able to cut down on travel time and be more responsive to the needs of each of our geographies across the region. You'll see here on the right some of the principles, certainly making sure that there is no wrong door, making sure that those with lived experience are incorporated into the staffing model. And another piece that is applicable for the North King County area is that we haven't distinguished whether this has to be in one single site or in a group of sites. And so we know that there will be, should the Crisis Care Center levy ballot be approved, there will be some existing resources that are present, and we want to make sure that the ballot measure was flexible enough to be adaptive to those existing facilities. Second piece for folks to be aware of is that we do not, as a county, intend that these crisis care centers would be owned or operated by the county. These would be provided by, driven by our provider network, who really is best positioned to understand what specifically their operation needs are, what their facility site will look like, and be able to propose that to the county. So next I'll go to that second purpose, or what we call our supporting purpose 1, and that is to restore the mental health residential capacity. As I noted, we've gone from 355 residential beds to 244 beds, and the levy would allow us to build back those 111 beds, as well as make sure that we don't lose additional beds. You'll see here this note at the bottom. There are federal restrictions on how many beds can be at each site. And so in order to leverage Medicaid funding for these operations, we would plan to site those facilities accordingly. For those who might not be as familiar with mental health residential capacity, just a couple of bullets about what mental health residential care is. And that is both the treatment, but also for these folks who may be leaving more institutionalized care, a hospital, really being able to give them support to practice their basic life skills, to be able to really build community so that they are prepared to go live independently in their own home. The mental health residential care model is fairly adaptive, and so we've got some folks that might stay for 6 months, some folks that might stay for 2 years, but the goal really being still trying to get folks to their own home and living that independent life in recovery. So finally, that supporting purpose 2, to invest in the workforce. As I mentioned, our vacancies have doubled, and we know that our behavioral health care really is dependent on those folks who can provide appropriate and quality care. And so the behavioral health levy would fund investments in both recruitment and retention. One example right now is that there is an apprenticeship that's been created with some federal short-term dollars to be able to attract folks into behavioral health care provision, to be able to support them through mentorship, through their education costs, and really being able to make sure that the behavioral health care door is open to them as an employee. But we also know that there are folks right now that are leaving really in droves for private practice, for higher paying kind of physical health care or medical care jobs. And so we want to make sure that the community-based care option is just as attractive to them and be able to invest in higher education and other kind of cost reduction options that are going to make sure that they can stay in that sector. Last couple of details, the behavioral health care levy was proposed at 14.5 cents for 9 years. That totals up to about $121 per year for what you'll see is the median countywide household. I'm sorry, I do not have your Kirkland numbers here, but as you can imagine, it's probably somewhere around this Redmond-Bellevue number. The new forecasts for based on this year as well as next year just came out a couple of weeks ago, and so we have seen a little bit of a slight dip in those numbers. The countywide median is now at about $118 per year. And then finally, the timeline, as I noted, this is on ballots for April 25th. And dependent on whether the voters approve that, then the county would go into an implementation planning process to be able to propose an implementation plan with full funding model at the end of this year for both the Regional Policy Committee as well as the full council to consider in 2024. And that is what I have for you tonight. I'm happy to take questions if there's time.
Council questions? Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here with us tonight. I'm really happy to hear that, well, first, it was very informative. I'm happy to hear that youth are being considered for one of the facilities here and being mandated that one of them will be if the ballot measure passes. So that 20% of the facilities that are going to be built for youth, the 1 and the 5, is that based on data of, you know, the need that's out there, that the total need, about 20% of it is youth? Is my first question. And then my second question is, can you define what we mean by youth? I'm wondering if that covers children as well, or if that would be a separate need there for children. Thank you.
Absolutely. A lot of these definitions are still waiting for the implementation plan, so I will just provide that caveat. I will say that the intention behind the split is really in the responses that we've heard from behavioral health providers and those really focused on serving youth, that they believed that a lot of youth are going to be best served in their home environments, surrounded by their network, whatever that looks like. And so what we've heard is just that there is a more limited population of youth that would need this type of care model. We also recognize as the county that we are not going to be able to fund all needs. And so we continue to work with the state legislature, as I know your city does, to be able to support our broader behavioral health care needs, where we're also talking about youth facility needs. So certainly more to go, but given the scale and the kind of distinct needs and setting opportunities, that's how we came to the balance of that.
Thank you. And can you define youth? Does that include all ages? Is that just teenagers, or what's that definition?
So that's one of the definitions that I don't believe that you will find in the ballot measure ordinance. I'll go back and read it and get back to you. But the goal is certainly to make it as comprehensive as our providers believe is appropriate. There's some licensing restrictions that we're going to have to work through with Department of Health, but really making sure that we're compliant with that licensing framework and then being able to serve as broad of a population as possible in that age where it's not going to be as appropriate for them to be served with other adults.
Other question, Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Kelly, for the presentation. When the Kirkland City Council last did one of our ballot measures, we had to take affirmative action to exempt the levy for seniors, people with disabilities, et cetera. Does the authorizing legislation for this do the same?
It does.
Thank you.
Super. Any other discussion? Diana. Thank you, Kelly.
And then I'm following up with a question of whether you'd like us to return at a future meeting to bring forward a resolution stating the council's position of either support or opposition to the levy.
Councilmember Nixon.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Of course, we all know state law allows us to do this, but I've consistently taken a position that it's a bad idea for us to take a position for or against ballot measures. And so I would prefer that we did not bring back a resolution for consideration, and would ask you to consider the fact that unless we do a special meeting, the earliest opportunity to do this would be April 4th. And the voting period on this starts on April 7th. So the opportunity for it to have any influence on people's votes would be extremely limited. So I would prefer no.
Thank you. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and put a motion on the floor. I move that we ask staff to prepare a resolution to be brought to us at our next regular meeting for council to consider taking a position on King County Proposition 1, Crisis Care Centers levy on the upcoming April 25th, 2023 special ballot.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Curtis. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't have any remarks prepared, but I just want to say this is certainly in line with our values and the direction that we're going as a city. It certainly goes hand in hand with a lot of the work that we're doing around behavioral health crisis response. And so it seems natural to me that we should support the work that King County is doing. And you know, we've partnered with the county on these efforts. We're continuing to partner with the county, and I think it would be beneficial to our community. And I think it's important that we demonstrate our support for those most in need in Kirkland. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Curtis.
Councilmember Falcone said my notes.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would also note, as we consider this resolution, we'll have an opportunity for both pro and con campaigns to make a presentation, have a public hearing, hear from the community on this. And because this is an April 25th special election, I think that is a community service that will help both not only inform our decision, but help the community. So I'm in favor of doing this at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but actually Deputy Mayor just answered my question.
Thank you very much. In which case, I'm going to throw my support to this as well. As the city who is leading the county in this work, I don't think we have any options. I understand Councilmember Nixon's resistance to this as a standard, but I think this is one that is very important for us to raise our hand right away.
And if I may, I would just emphasize, I support the ballot measure.
I know.
I just consistently oppose having formal resolutions for or against ballot measures.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Curtis to move forward with a letter of support. Is that what it was? Resolution in support. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion carries. Thank you. Okay, that takes us then to our consent calendar. Before we have a motion, I'd like to ask Deputy Mayor Arnold to present the audit of accounts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had payroll in the amount of $4,732,289.73 and bills in the amount of $4,430,935.01.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Curtis.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Falcone. Discussion.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I was distracted and I wasn't prepared. I would like to make a motion to pull the DIB work plan off the consent calendar. There's a lot of very interesting things in the DEI work plan, and I would like it to come to council for a presentation and a discussion.
Second.
Okay.
Question? So I just want to be clear. You're not talking about pulling it. You're talking about postponing it to a future meeting when there can be a presentation. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Curtis, seconded by Councilmember Falcone to pull the...
Postpone.
Or postpone, thank you. The DEIB work plan update until a future meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to pull item 8H2, the RE+ resolution, for consideration during our business agenda.
Thank you. That will make it item D, item E.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the question is on the motion to approve the amended consent calendar. Moved by Councilmember Curtis, second by Councilmember Falcone. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is approved. Takes us to our business calendar. The first item on our business calendar is permanent supportive housing agreement with King County. Did you want to say anything, Council or City Manager?
Well, I just want to go ahead and introduce Deputy City Manager Jim Lopez, who along with Darcy Eilers has been working very hard in partnership with King County to bring this item for council action. We are hoping tonight, after nearly a year of very thoughtful discussion and outreach to the community and work with our King County partner, and we're looking for final action tonight should the council be ready to do so. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lopez.
Thank you very much, City Manager, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. It seems like just yesterday it was March 2022, and we were here for Resolution 5522. So thank you. Very pleased to be before you tonight, once again with a lot of gratitude and appreciation for Assistant City Attorney Darcy Eilers, who has joined us via Teams, and Andriana Campbell, our kind of core team on this really important work. I'd also like to recognize Leo Floor and Kelly Ryder, who are here tonight. Thank you both for coming to help answer any questions as well. So with that, we'll jump into the presentation. A very focused presentation, Madam Mayor, to perhaps bring to a decision of the council for this important work. So we'll structure the presentation around the recommendation tonight and perhaps a brief background. I think I've given that background several times, so we'll move quickly through that. A different kind of background for Section 2, background screening, which is really the fundamental issue we're here to talk about tonight. We have a few housekeeping, just two changes we would like to bring just to make you aware of, and then next actions. And I do understand there may be some amendments tonight, so here on the next action section is where we would address that. So next slide. So for the recommendation, we recommend that the council consider final draft agreement with the option to approve resolution that we have prepared in your packet, Resolution R5538, which would authorize the city manager to execute the proposed agreement, this package of agreements. Now, we have updated the draft agreements consistent with my March 7th presentation, where we focused on the screening process, and we kind of read the council's reaction to that presentation, and thank you, Director Floor, as kind of using the council's screening process as the foundation to the screening process itself. So if there's going to be changes to that, we're going to start with this kind of behavioral health model, this kind of comprehensive model that the county put forth. What we are going to do in tonight's presentation is go over some of the changes we made to that county screening process based on Director Floor's comments and feedback from the council. The actual documents in the packet are clean documents. They don't have strike and edits, so we put the strike and edits in my memo, and the strike and edits will show up here in the presentation. And of course, once I go through all that, we are prepared to respond to any amendments to the screening process. Next slide. By way of quick background, we have been working with the county and the community, and thank you, community. The community has been very much engaged in this process for some time now. A really great overview of all of that work can be found at our website. You just type in the search bar Health Through Housing, and you'll see a timeline and a lot of the documents and all of the work we've done. So I'm going to direct folks to that and move to the next slide. It is a pretty comprehensive body of information. Now, I've used this slide several times because I think it helps to bring simplicity to some complexity. What we're talking about tonight is in the dotted red box, the permanent supportive housing agreement and a services agreement of which the county would be obligated to use in substantially similar form. We're very grateful to the county for this. This has been a very upfront, transparent process. I don't know that they've ever done it like this before, but what we're trying to do is give the community very clear guidance as to what we're doing, and we're trying to push the decisions forward so that the council has input into those decisions. For example, like the screening processes we're talking tonight. We've worked with the county to do that so that we can get it done early and then move into the work that needs to be done in the future. The PSHA, the Permanent Supportive Housing Agreement document, and the Services Agreement document reflect on the operator selection, as you can see in the graphic. It has code of conduct language, community relations plan, safety and security plan, good neighbor agreement. A lot of the things the community has been asking about, you could see in this body of work. So we're very proud of that, and we urge folks to read through that. And once again, we don't show legislative changes, so let me go through in the following slides exactly what changes we made to the county's proposed screening process. Next slide. And here that would be. Next slide. So at the March 7th council meeting, we clarified review that the state and national sex offender registries would be completed by the King County Sheriff's Office. This was very important to staff. We needed to make sure that that database, which is the most comprehensive database, would be used. The county also named the behavioral health databases that would be used for further screening to potential residents. This is very important because this is where I think the council saw the details and the comprehensiveness of the behavioral screening process, which is its behavioral health screening process, which is it has come to be known. There's credibility in those details. I think the county has some edits that they would like to make to that in our screening process. So I don't think they're fully substantive. I'll let the director speak to them, but for the most part, what we have done here is added that language in the county's screening process in this document so the council and the community can see that. Now, the next few slides are going to outline where in the PSHA, the Permanent Supportive Housing Agreement, we have made the changes that I just discussed. So next slide. First, you can see in section 3A5 that we are not allowing the delegation of duty to include the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office has to do the work. So that's a key add from the presentation. The second key add is that the King County Sheriff's Office needs to be involved from the beginning. They need to review the applicants first and foremost. They're going to do it with their own screening, which is a more comprehensive screening, and that includes the National Sex Offender Registry. So together, the Washington Sex Offender Registry, the Public Registry, and the National Sex Offender Registry through the King County Sheriff's Office is what we had hoped for, and that is what the county has agreed to. So that is now in the agreement. Next slide. We have also included, as I noted, all of the databases that the county will use to do this very comprehensive behavioral health screening. We feel there's real credibility here as you go through these databases. I do understand there is a proposed edit to this, but substantively, we feel very comfortable bringing this level of detail to the council and the community to show just how comprehensive this behavioral health screening process is. So we added that in the PSHA under section 3, subsection small c2. Next slide. So with that, we've made 2 housekeeping modifications. Next slide. One is in section 4 of the PSHA. Councilmember Curtis had asked about performance measures, and we have had a lot of questions about performance measures from the community. The county has agreed to work with the city to incorporate those types of performance measures, positive performance measures. We have a robust list of performance measures already in our agreement. I think Councilmember Pascal asked about performance measures as well. We're going to work with the county so that we can use our partnership so they can use their consultant to get this data to all their permanent supportive housing facilities. That's part of the reason why they want to work together, so they can aggregate it and do it for everybody at one time. But we're also going to think creatively about ways that we can communicate success of the program. That's one of the things we have agreed to do together so that we can communicate to the community whether it's working or not and how. Additionally, the county has asked us, and this truly, I believe, is housekeeping, that the eligibility is for single adults with disabilities, replacing the old language in their document. So those are the two housekeeping items. Now, I've moved kind of expeditiously through that because we did go through that last presentation on the 7th, and that brings us to next actions. I'd like to stop here, Madam Mayor, and just ask Director Fleur to come up briefly, because I know the council has asked about the county's position, particularly on the screening process, and I would want to make sure the director can articulate that for you tonight, being responsive to the council. And then with that, we would be prepared to entertain any amendments, should there be amendments. With respect to the amendments, we're prepared to go in any order that you would like, Madam Mayor, but because there potentially are a few of them, it might be helpful to separate the screening process amendments with the non-screening process amendments, just for simplicity, although we're prepared to do it in any way that you would like. We have.
So following Director Fleur's presentation, though, then we would simply go to the screening.
You could go directly to the amendments. And I think, Director Fleur, just a comment on the county's perspective, continuing perspective on background screening.
Welcome, Director Fleur.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. I was grateful for the opportunity to present at the last council meeting and wanted to follow up today with a little bit more information on the concept of background screening, what the county has proposed, and how we believe it fits the overall goal that we've heard articulated that we agree with, that everyone within and around the facility should be safe. I think that's uncontroversial, and I think the question that we discussed at the last meeting was what is the most effective way and the least discriminatory way to achieve that shared goal. Right now, as it is currently proposed, there is at least a 4-step and potentially a 5-step screening process that we have all agreed to in substance, although the council has yet to make a formal consideration. So first, a person who would be referred would have to be referred from somewhere, and Councilmember Curtis made this point, but I have the data to substantiate it. The average amount of time that will elapse between a person being initially screened and then placed in permanent supportive housing in King County right now is 236 days. During those 236 days between their initial screening and then their referral to housing, they must stay engaged with the provider that did the screening. Whatever screening that provider did in order to bring that person in, our agreement contemplates that that would be applicable in the first level of screening that would happen. And the county has agreed to consider that information if it's provided. The second level of screening, as Deputy City Manager Lopez mentioned, is that all residents will be screened by the King County Sheriff's Office to identify whether or not they have been convicted of and carry any of the registration requirements for sex offenses that already under state law make it illegal for them to reside within a community protection zone. And we believe that that is uncontroversial as well. The third layer of screening that we have already agreed to is that we would then, using counties' access to databases, apply and can consider ourselves the person's entries in the behavioral health database, what we call the ECLS database, also the homeless management information system. We believe that those two databases actually have the tightest nexus to being able to meaningfully determine whether or not or what types of behaviors we would expect to see from a person when they are residing within a facility. The one administrative change that Deputy City Manager Lopez mentioned is we would like to place the reference to the core system with the reference to the Medicaid system. And what that does is it puts it behind a consistent with data use agreements. We do have to make sure that we're monitoring and adhering to the data use agreements that we have in place with the core system. But the core system is not where you will find behavioral health data from a particular person. The final layer of screening that we have already agreed to is that a person would then have to sit within a provider and conduct an interview. So we are now, in that interview, the purpose of which would be to sit down, determine whether or not the services at the facility would be suitable for the person. And so depending on whether or not the initial referring provider, on average, almost a year ago, will have done a criminal background screening of their own or not, or whatever screening they do, we are either at 4 or 5 layers of screening. What I presented last week was that the introduction of another level of screening, which would be a broadly applied criminal background check, we believe is less effective than the process I have just described, carries the substantial risk of additional discriminatory effect, which is a position that even the department at the federal level of Housing and Urban Development has supported, and that we have a more effective, less discriminatory way of achieving that same level of safety. So it is the county's position that to then apply that additional layer of screening would constitute a barrier that begins to detract from the ability of people to access the housing who need it without enhancing the safety that would be afforded by the facility and imposing the additional, at least potential discriminatory effects that come with the use of that third-party criminal background screening. What I do want to convey as we've continued to talk to city staff over the course of the last 2 weeks is we can identify that there may be some particular situations that are tightly tailored to the specific concerns that we've talked about with respect to establishing safety where a criminal background check could be appropriate. And so as the council is considering some of those amendments tonight, I do want to say that if we're able to identify tightly tailored nexuses, whatever the plural of nexus is, to situations that might specifically involve persons with a sexual offense registration requirement that are not otherwise prohibited, or perhaps where we have a risk of violence or something that is a very specific type of crime, that we would consider supporting the use of background checks in very narrowly tailored instances like that, in addition to the other steps in the process that I had mentioned. And again, I believe that the council has the question before it of how to balance both the question of access, effectiveness, and safety, and what we have proposed and would support, we believe does balance that in a very finely tuned way so that we are getting people into permanent supportive housing. We are mindful of the fact that people continue to pass away without housing in our community by the hundreds every year. And this is a way that we believe can move forward and support safety for people inside the building, who work at the building, and just as importantly for the community that works around the building. Subject to any questions, that concludes what I had to say, Madam Mayor.
Council, any questions? Thank you very much. Pardon me. Thank you very much for that.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. So I thought it was important that the county express their view. And with that, I turn it over to you, Madam Mayor, for potential amendments.
Okay. We have had a lot of discussion with regard to, not discussion, but we've had a lot of sharing today with regard to potential amendments. So I'm simply going to pick the first amendment, and I'm going to have Councilmember Pascal start off.
I assume we need to move the resolution first, correct?
We can do that first. You want to go ahead?
I'll move Resolution 5583.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Pascal, seconded by Councilmember Falcone. Discussion. Councilmember Pascal.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Definitely appreciate all the input from the community over the last weeks and months. A lot of varied opinions, and obviously this has been a difficult conversation, challenging discussion. And thank you, Leo, for sharing some of your thoughts today. I think the one thing that you said that I think's resonated strongly through what I've heard is that we share the same goals, and that's serving those in need and having safety at the forefront. So based upon that, I do want to offer an amendment, and and then I'll speak to it if there's support. So let me bring it up. So the purpose of this amendment is to require the county or designee to perform criminal background checks on a subset of prospective residents who either have been convicted of sex offenses but are not entirely ineligible from residing at the facility through the existing restrictions, or have been determined during the county screening process to have past violent behaviors. So let me read this. I move to amend the permanent supportive housing agreement attached as Exhibit A to the pending resolution 5583 at E-page 759, Section 3, subsection C, by adding a new subsection C3 and renumbering the subsequent subsections, with the new subsection C3 to read as follows. The county will, after obtaining a signed written authorization to obtain criminal conviction records, conduct a criminal history background check on any prospective resident aged 18 and older when either, 1, the prospective resident appears on the registry but is not determined ineligible under subsection 3B2I, or 2, the county determines at any point in the suitability screening process that the prospective resident's conduct or history clearly demonstrates violent behavior. The resulting criminal history information will be considered as part of the review performed pursuant to subsection 3C2, and consideration and use of the information will be implemented in a manner consistent with the Federal Fair Housing Act. The county need not perform a separate criminal history background check if a referring organization provides the county with an equivalent background check of the prospective resident performed within the last 6 months.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Councilmember Pascal, seconded by Deputy Mayor Arnold. Discussion. Councilmember Pascal.
So I'll kind of briefly just talk to this amendment since I prepared it. I want to be clear that I support background checks as another data point to consider, but recognize the county doesn't. And I'm also frankly concerned that there isn't majority support on this council for background checks. So therefore, I prepared this amendment with those two realities in mind, as I believe some background checks are better than none. I want to be clear that I recognize that the criminal justice system may be skewed by institutional bias. However, I don't believe the response then is not to conduct background checks, nor do I believe we should disregard information that can be obtained from that information, such as a person's history of violent behavior toward people. Requiring a background check really comes down to a risk assessment in my mind. I don't want to exclude, but want to ensure the safety of the surrounding community and other residents. So I really see that this would provide additional information that can be considered during the screening process. So therefore, this amendment essentially threads the needle and introduces specific criteria when a background check is required. In other words, it contains a threshold analysis and recognizes there are some individuals that we absolutely need to learn more about. It focuses on those individuals with sexual assault convictions and those individuals that have demonstrated past violent behaviors. My understanding is that this amendment has the support of the county. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Further discussion? Question is on the motion to accept, Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to, I do have a question for the staff, if you will, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and Councilmember Pascal did just say this, but I want to make sure that it's not the council saying this, that we understand what we heard from Director Floor, and that it's true that that this is the narrow circumstance in which the county would be willing to do a background check. And I'll just add a little color commentary. You know, we're not in a pure legislative role. We are in the role of negotiating a contract with the county. And so I think it is incumbent upon us to understand sort of what the meaning of modifications to the agreement might mean with respect to reaching an agreement with the county. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember. The county would support this amendment.
Thank you.
Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I first want to thank Councilmember Pascal for bringing forth this motion. Thank you to King County for collaborating on this and sharing your input on it. I really appreciate and respect how collaboratively we work together as a council. I think that's really being demonstrated here tonight, and I appreciate all the public input, as some of my colleagues have shared. as well as stakeholders and community members that have shared these thoughts with us over the past year or so. These issues are not easy. And in my perspective, I believe we each have good intent, even when we disagree. We all want to keep our loved ones and our neighbors safe. I've shared before that I don't support a general blanket national background check as part of this process, and I really appreciate the nuances here and the specific situations that Councilmember Pascal is proposing, that we would agree to have criminal background checks for potential residents. I want to say that as a mom of 3 young kids, I care deeply about the safety of children and the rest of our community. I also care deeply that our community members are treated fairly, regardless of gender, race, age, disability status, or other demographic characteristics. And if we were to do a blanket one, which it sounds like we are not, considering that on this motion, we wouldn't be treating people fairly if we require that some of our residents and not others undergo a criminal background check before moving into potential new housing. For example, there's an in-home childcare facility very close to my home. And the folks who sold us our home did not require us to undergo a criminal background check before we moved in. I don't see how this should be any different for folks seeking to live in this home. The only difference I see here is that future residents of this building are disabled and/or older and have experienced being unhoused. So requiring a criminal background check is not in alignment with our values of equity. It would be quite the opposite. That said, I appreciate the compromise here with Councilmember Pascal's motion tonight, and so I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My thought had been that Councilmember Pascal's proposed amendment would be a fallback position if a stronger amendment requiring universal background checks had failed. And so I want as many background checks as we can get. And I think it would be most fair for everyone to have a background check. But I won't vote no on this because I think a stronger one is needed. I will vote yes on this. I will still propose the amendment that I have sent out earlier today and would like it to be considered. If they both pass, then we will have to resolve the differences between them. And so that would be an additional task that we have set up for ourselves as a result of not doing the strongest amendment first. But I'll support this, but I don't think it goes far enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The question is on the motion to approve the Pascal amendment as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes. Any further amendments? Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the amendment number 2 that was distributed earlier today.
We can bring that up, I think. Thank you.
Oh, this is, there we go, amendment number 2. So what this amendment would do, I'll explain it first rather than just read the text, is require a criminal background check, a report on every prospective resident. But it would not be screening. There would be no automatic disqualification of someone as a resident as a result of this background check. The background check would be provided for consideration as part of the suitability review. There would be no bright line that says if you have a certain level of violent crime in your background that you are excluded from the facility. But it would be information, and we need to remember that the agreement already has language that says criminal background information will be considered if it's available. But it can't be considered if it's not available, so we ought to make it available. So that information would help improve the safety of the residents and the staff of the facility by having the staff be aware potentially of previous violent criminal acts by a resident. It would also help to craft programming for the individual residents based on their background, based on their lived experience, that directly addresses the situation they are in their life. And if there's no information about someone's previous criminal background, there's no way to address that in the program that they receive. And so I move the adoption of the amendment as currently shown on the screen.
Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Nixon,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Pascal. Discussion, further discussion from Councilmember Nixon? Discussion. Question is on the motion to adopt amendment number 2, introduced by Councilmember Nixon. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Motion fails. Any additional amendments?
So there may be some additional amendments that don't involve screening?
Correct. We move on to additional amendments that don't involve screening. Councilmember Nixon.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 4. The first one, my amendment number 1, is a simple clarification of the language in section 2A. The way it was written before could have been interpreted as the city is required to concur in the county's selection of a provider. And I simply wanted to make it clear that the city has the discretion to concur or not to concur in the county's selection of a provider. And I discussed this with staff. They agree that was the intent. And so this is simply clarifying what was already the intended understanding.
So a motion from Councilmember Nixon on amendment
I
number
move
1.
adoption of this amendment number 1.
It's been moved by Councilmember Nixon, second by Councilmember Curtis, to adopt amendment number 1 introduced by Councilmember Nixon. Just further discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Councilmember Nixon.
So next for consideration is my amendment 3. As we all know, there was some amount of controversy over the process by which the La Quinta site was selected. And in fact, some people in the community believe that it was kept from the public longer than the Health Through Housing Implementation Plan really allowed it to be kept. And we wanted to ensure, to the maximum degree possible, that the process for considering any additional sites for permanent supportive housing through the HTH program in Kirkland would precisely follow the steps in the implementation plan, so that the public would be involved and have an opportunity for input before a site is selected and a contract placed on the property. And so that's what this amendment would do, and I move adoption of amendment number 3.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Pascal to adopt amendment number 3. All those in favor, or any further discussion? Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Quick question for the staff. As I read this amendment, this does not require anything of the county other than to comply with their implementation plan. Is that true?
That is how we read it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Arnold, or Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to be voting against this amendment. It's not our role as the Kirkland City Council to ensure that the county is following their own policies. Although, if we're running our own policy and we're running our own process, it may be different. Secondly, this amendment talks about future agreements, and I think any future agreement we should consider separately and leave this agreement to the current facility. And so we'll be voting against this.
Thank you. Councilmember Pascal.
I'll be supporting this amendment, basically because from what I understand, it's basically a lessons learned from the process here. And I think this would be just more open and transparent moving forward and clear on the direction that we seek. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to briefly respond to the Deputy Mayor's comment about this is a future-looking thing. The fact is the whole section is future-looking to future alternatives or future sites for permanent supportive housing in Kirkland. And so if we wanted to keep this agreement focused only on the La Quinta, we would delete this section entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This amendment's been moved and seconded, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to move for an amendment to the amendment.
Of course you would.
I know. I would like to, it's actually, I think, cleanup, honestly. But the comments made by Deputy Mayor did start making me think about how things do change in the future. And I would suggest, I think there's actually, by the way, a whole much simpler way to say this without the extra commentary. But without addressing that, I think we can still strike with step 7 and replace it with public input consistent with the property siting process stated with the implementation plan. The goal being here to, consistent with my question to staff, that we're simply stating that the county is going to be complying with its own implementation plan. We don't know what step 7 will be a year from now or 2 years from now. So I would move to strike that and replace it with the.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Black, seconded by Councilmember Falcone to strike with step 7 and insert the language.
Madam Mayor, we have for, yeah.
I see that. It's driving, it's wonderful. So any further discussion on that? Question is on the amendment to the amendment. Moved by Councilmember Black, seconded by Councilmember Falcone to change the language to what is before us now. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So the question is now on the original amendment, moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Pascal, to adopt amended amendment number 3. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Was that, I think the motion carries. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
And me. I was a no.
I know. Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the last amendment, my number 5, is very simple. I've actually seen this issue in other county documents, that the King County Auditor is not the repository of records in the King County government. It's the King County Recorder's Office. The auditor in King County's structure actually just performs audits. And so this is a simple editorial change to correct where an executed copy of the agreement would be recorded. So I move adoption of amendment number 5.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Falcone to adopt amendment number 5. Discussion? Seeing none. Question is on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Any further amendments for discussion?
Oh, I do have another one. I skipped over one of my own amendments.
I'm watching.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, amendment number 4. When I first read through or my most recent review of the agreement, it talked about the agreement terminating when the facility is no longer used for permanent supportive housing. But that seemed to me to be a pretty vague statement, and that different people could have different interpretation of what it means for the facility to no longer be being used for permanent supportive housing. And so I proposed initially to add the words that the county declares in writing provided to the city that the facility will no longer be used for PSH as the triggering event. That it's not simply that somebody observes that it's not being used, like if it was vacant because of a fire or an earthquake or something like that, but it actually requires a written declaration from the county. And then my understanding is that Councilmember Black separately wanted to amplify on that and add that the effective date of that termination will be the date declared by the county. So what you have in this slide is the combination of those two different ideas. So rather than have an amendment and then an amendment to the amendment, we just propose the whole thing to you on the slide. So I move this amendment number 4.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Black. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further amendments?
Councilman Curtis.
Mr. Lopez.
Madam Mayor, thank you. With the permission of the mayor and the city attorney, I thought we would call up the slide by which the county has asked for our staff presentation to be amended. Now, I think we would do this by a motion, city attorney, if it is agreeable to the council. But Director Flores, I was wondering if you could come up and explain some of these changes. I think they are consistent with Director Flores' earlier statement that they want the core database to be in the medical claims database section. I do think you might want to speak to case management and behavioral health as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The two changes in this section, first, it would shift the core database, which again is our non-behavioral health database, into the section that requires the adherence to data use agreements. And that's something that's necessary for us in order to deploy the data for this purpose. And then the second is to clarify that it would be a provider conducting the intake interview. This replaces a previous version of the very specifically named behavioral health provider, which I think gets into a specific licensure requirements. And we instead here would contemplate that it might be another case manager, for example, of a provider. And so those are the two changes that we have requested of staff.
Thank you. I need a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we, I'm at a loss for words right now, I'm very tired, sorry. I move that we amend as King County is requesting on the screen.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Black. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Lopez.
I'm not sure if you'll see me here again on this topic, so thank you.
I think we've accomplished a lot with this, and I really appreciate everybody working so hard on it. Councilmember Falcone.
Have we voted on the initial motion to
Resolution.
adopt the resolution?
Good point. So the question is on the original motion, moved by Councilmember Pascal, seconded by Councilmember Falcone, to authorize the city manager to sign the agreement.
I think it's Resolution 5583.
As amended.
Resolution 5583 as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying, yes, sir.
Perhaps some closing.
Certainly,
Offered
some
closing
closing
comment.
discussion. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been a long process, and we've worked very hard as a council to balance the needs of having the most successful, having a successful facility in the location of the former La Quinta Inn, based on the things that we've been hearing from folks that work in this space, not only in the county, but within our own community around the folks that run safe parking and the shelter at Friends of Youth, and the information that we're getting from how the county goes and does us, balancing that with community concerns that we've heard. And what you see out of this process is stronger than what is within the agreements of other communities. And I think strikes the balance of saying, how do we get people off the street and into homes, which is the goal all of us share. And so I'm glad to be able to, and proud to be able to get to this point where we are moving forward to help people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree. I think that we got to a good place. I know that there will be people in the community who are not satisfied. But I would like to remind everybody that this is an important milestone, but the process is not done. That there is still the working out of the agreement with the provider, or the provider selection, the working out of the agreement with the provider, the adoption of the code of conduct for residents, all of which we will have input on and which the community can continue to have input on. And then even after the facility is opened, there will be continual reports that we receive about how well it's working. There will be a community liaison where people who have concerns can raise them and have them addressed. And if problems arise down the road, they can be considered and corrective action taken. Like everything else that happens in government, nothing is ever truly done. We always can come back and work on it more to refine it and make it better. So I will be voting yes on this and expect to be actively involved for some time into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Black.
You've told me in the past, Madam Mayor, to not fight you on the order, so I'm going, but I'm pretty sure Councilmember Falcone was first. I was just going to riff a little bit off of what my colleagues have just said. I negotiate contracts for a living, and one of the biggest mistakes we can make is thinking that we're done when we sign the contract. That's when the work begins. And so I would just, to the entire community, everyone who's expressed enthusiasm for this as an important solution to the continuum of care, for everyone who's expressed concern, I just remind us, staff, everyone in the community, that the real work begins when we welcome our new neighbors to this facility. And there's so many opportunities that we have. We've talked about it before, but I just want to say it again. There's so many opportunities we have as a community to come together and welcome our new neighbors. And I think that's as important as anything we put on paper in the contract. So not that the contract's not important, it's just equally important as what we do and how we behave as a community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I really appreciate and echo the comments of my fellow council members, so thank you for that. I also do want to acknowledge that this is a significant milestone. I'm hopeful and appreciative that our chronically unhoused and disabled community members will have a future permanent home in this building with the services that they need to lead a successful and a fulfilling life. So thank you so much to King County for your leadership on this effort, for choosing to involve the city of Kirkland in this effort in partnership, and for working with us to come to an agreement that considers and balances the many different points of view within our community. A huge thank you to Deputy City Manager Jim Lopez and Assistant City Attorney Darcy Eilers for your hard work and dedication on behalf of the City Council and the people of Kirkland. And thank you to all of our stakeholders and community members who have engaged with us over the past year plus during this process. Kirkland, I mean, we say it all the time, it's a little cliche, but it's true. This is why we say it so much, that Kirkland is a really, really special place to be. And this facility will make us an even better and more inclusive city. I'm really looking forward to welcoming the new residents, our neighbors, in this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Curtis.
I was reluctant to speak because I feel like I've said my thank yous many times. But I will again extend my heartfelt gratitude for everyone that's been involved with this. Deputy Mayor Darcy, Mr. Flores, Kelly Ryder, the community, Eastside Prep, everybody that's been involved. And as everyone has said already, this has been a challenging process. We will continue to keep an eye on it and move forward. And I'm really looking forward to housing our new neighbors.
Councilmember Curtis, point of order. You said deputy mayor. We love the deputy mayor. And we think he's great and we appreciate his role, but I think you meant deputy city manager.
Okay, and I'll just finish it off with, thank you all. I'm really proud of this council for doing this. I'm really proud of the county for working so hard to get us someplace where we could actually go. And now can we please go there? Thank you so much, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Okay, do you want to take the break now? I figured that might be the case. Oh, the vote, sorry. Question is on the motion to adopt Resolution 5583 as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we will now take a 15-minute break. Thank you. We are back to our regular meeting and our business agenda, item number 2, which is our budget adjustments for the 2022 carryovers.
Right.
George, be kind to us with a brief report tonight.
Will do.
Go ahead, City Manager.
Okay, thank you. Well, so George Dugdale, our financial planning manager, is going to make this presentation. These are budget items that did not get completed last year that need to be carried over to this year's budget. So take it away, George.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. So good evening, Mayor, Council. We have 9 slides for you this evening to run quickly through the carryovers and some additional FTE authority for the Kirkland Fire Department. While I have the cover of the 23-24 budget on this slide, I do want to quickly let Council know that we've posted the final 23-24 budget book to the city's website. So the schedule for budget adjustments during this biennium, so March is in the first year, is traditionally our first opportunity to do budget adjustments. They're primarily carryovers, as the city manager said, which are unspent items from 21-22. And as you can see from this slide, we have 4 further scheduled adjustments. The next is in June 2023. We recognize year-end 22 balances and bring operating and capital adjustments. Just quick background on the carryovers themselves. As I briefly mentioned, they primarily bring forward appropriation from 21-22 that will be unspent and spent in 23-24, normally in 23. And the process is designed to be for discrete projects, contracts, and invoices that are continuing into 2023, rather than carrying forward general unspent appropriations. In this adjustment set, we are also recommending the addition of 11 FTE positions in the Kirkland Fire Department that I will discuss in a later slide. And as you can see, the total appropriation change in this adjustment set is just over 7 million, which is a little under 1% of the total city biennial budget. So the first category is for projects not completed. This is the largest category within this budget adjustments. And I've highlighted a couple of the larger items here, including comprehensive plan work and transportation master plan work, which began in 2022, but which for the primary external contracts will be carried out in 23-24, work in the street fund that will be used to improve the city streetlight infrastructure, and as well as a proposed carryover of citywide savings in training and travel, which you can see in the general fund section of that table. Departments across the city identified training and travel as an area that for various reasons would need additional budget in 23-24. These include new staff hirings, trainings missed in 21-22, either because they weren't held or because people were unable to travel, and the need to retain existing staff. So as a part of this, we are proposing carrying over the nearly 500,000 in the general fund for both training, the combined training and travel, and allocating it out proportionately to departments. The next category is open contracts, outstanding invoices, and procurements. So some of the larger items identified here, but in all cases, these are items for which either a contract or an invoice was created in 2022, but has not yet been finished, or was rather not finished in 2022, and the final pieces will be spent in the 2023 calendar and budget year. The final category of carryovers is the ARPA adjustments, which is specific to this process. We don't have these every year. As the council knows, the city received slightly over $10 million of ARPA funds in 2021-22. Of that 10 million, about 6.7 million was spent in 21-22, leaving a little over 3 million that's being carried into 23-24. That's this number here. The first table on the slide shows that we have about $190,000 of projects we're closing and about $780,000 of ARPA balance above the estimates we made when the original budget was put together. That balance was 2.3 million. So if you add the 2.2 million we originally had, the additional above estimates and the project closures, that's where you get this $3.2 million. I also want to highlight in the top of the table there, the project carryovers number, which is just over 1.1 million. So some of this is for projects that are ongoing, but a significant portion is for projects that are either complete or being adjusted into a different project. But instead of the money returning to the main ARPA balance, it's going directly into a new project. So a notable example of this, and something I believe we have a question about, is the 450,000 in rent relief phase 2. This funding will be combined with the approximately 20,000 in Imagine Housing rent relief, which both of those are shown in the table in the memo, as well as 250,000 in the 2023 ARPA funds. This will be used to create 2 new human services grant programs that focus on 2 priority areas, housing stability and behavioral health. The grant awards will be given to a number of organizations, including King County Bar Association, LifeWire, Eastside Legal Assistance Program, and others. So as I said, there was a council question about the unspent balance in this phase 2 housing project, the just over 450,000. So we have some information on that. The program, unlike phase 1, was not something that was open to public application, but was instead open to households who either did not receive through assistance through the King County program, who were in the phase 1 of the city's rental relief program, but still had rental arrears. There was a total list of 117 households on this list. Of those households, 32 received rental assistance, and of the remainder, 25 were found to be ineligible and 55 did not respond. That left us with the just over $450,000 balance, which, as I mentioned, is being carried into 2023 and used for 2 new ARPA projects, but in the same area. As a final note on this slide, once the approved project adjustments and the planned 2023 projects are accounted for, the city has approximately just over $1.4 million in unallocated ARPA funds. So Moving away from the financial carryovers, the final area here is the additional position authority. So in recent months, the King County vaccine mandate was lifted, and the city has reached out to former firefighters who separated during that mandate to inquire about their return. Currently, fire staff believe that up to 9 former firefighters may return. Additionally, the city has up to 10 firefighters either in the current academy or the next academy that I think will be run in August. On the other side, we do have some vacancies, but there's also a number of current firefighters who are eligible to retire who may do so soon, but have not informed the city of that intention. Therefore, due to both the active recruiting that we have following Prop 1 and because of the vaccine mandate returns, the Kirkland Fire Department, we're requesting additional authority for 11 positions that can be filled. The intention of this, although they are ongoing FTE positions, the intention is that this would be temporary. As retirements happen, these positions will initially be vacant and then will be removed from the list in future budget adjustments. The budget impacts will be monitored closely, but are currently unknown. So there are two factors, or a number of factors, I guess, impacting the budget. The hiring timelines for returning firefighters is unknown. The department does have existing vacancy savings, which can be used to offset any overhires. And more regular staff, if we end up with a situation where we have more firefighters than we originally had scheduled, staff believe this would lead to a reduction in overtime. So we will be monitoring the financial impacts of this closely, but we do think the budget impacts will be limited. So my penultimate slide here shows the appropriation adjustments by the type of fund. So you can see there in the appropriation adjustments column at the bottom, the total budget number just over $7 million. The bulk of it in the general fund, but then spread across some of the other operating funds as well. So final slide, next steps. Staff recommends approving Ordinance 04843, amending the 23-24 budget. The next budget adjustments are coming in June, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, George. Any questions, discussion? Councilmember Black?
I didn't have a question. I was going to move the motion, move the ordinance. Okay. I move Ordinance 04843.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Black, seconded by Councilmember Curtis. Discussion? Seeing none, the question is on the motion to approve Ordinance 4843. Is that 48? Yes, 4843. Moved by Councilmember Black, seconded by Councilmember Curtis. All those in favor, oops. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Nixon?
Yes.
Councilmember Black?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Falcone?
Yes.
Councilmember Pascal?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Mayor Sweet?
Yes, motion carries. That takes us to item C, the state legislative update number 5. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So to give us that update is our Government Affairs Manager, Diana Hart. And we have one item out of pursuits that we want to make sure we check in with the council about.
Welcome, Diana.
Good evening, Council. As mentioned, this is our 5th legislative update of the session. Getting started, we'll go over the same 3 topics that we normally do. Starting off with our legislative calendar. Today is day 72 of the 105-day session. We've passed the House of Origin cutoff now, so with 611 bills surviving, all the bills that are being considered are either from the other chamber or have the magic NTIB designation to keep moving past these cutoffs. Next week is the Policy Committee cutoff, which will be followed shortly by the Fiscal Committee cutoff less than a week later. So the pace of session is definitely picking up from here with just over a month left to go. That will take us to a status of where we are now. Looking at the housing-focused legislative priorities, Senator Cooter's version of the accessory dwelling unit bill had its public hearing last week and was exec'd out of committee yesterday with a strong bipartisan vote. During the discussion, there was mention of some changes that members would like to see moving forward. So we'll continue to work through those pieces to ensure it continues along to passage this session. Representative Klopa's version of the bill did not pass out of the House prior to cutoff, so it has been returned to the Rules Committee. We don't anticipate that this version will move this year, and we will be focusing our efforts on Senator Cooter's version. And then Representative Chop's REIT bill is still in the fiscal committee, but is still being discussed, like it could potentially move at some point, or could potentially be the reason that other pieces of legislation start moving, like the governor's proposal to increase the capital budget limit to support affordable housing construction. Either way, these pieces got a lot of traction and conversation this year, so we look forward to continuing moving forward if they are not passed this session. Now that we're back in committee mode, this slide is quite full once again with bills that the city is engaging on during the committee process. Under housing related bills, we have property tax exemption for nonprofit housing that the city signed in support, in addition to tenant protections, missing middle housing, lot splitting, addressing housing discrimination due to restrictive covenants, ADUs, funding options for affordable housing, promoting transit-oriented development. Under sustainability, we have policies related to workforce program to support climate-ready communities, climate change incorporation and comprehensive planning, energy in buildings, energy labeling of homes, clean energy economy, battery stewardship, and then we testified this week on energy labeling of homes. Under reproductive health care, we have health data, prohibition cost sharing for abortion. Under behavioral health, we have the 988 crisis responder policy, prescription coverage continuity for behavioral health, certified peer specialists, expanding use of county sales tax for mental health and housing, and then we testified on the 23-hour crisis relief center bill. Under firearm safety, we have a handful of bills related to requirements for purchase or transfer of firearms, firearm-related safety measures, records for firearm background checks, juvenile record access, waiver of firearm rights, and firearm industry public safety duties. And under our general principles, we have extreme weather event response, tourism support, state broadband map, addressing consumer gender discrimination, equity in public works procurement, traffic impact fees, use for bike and pedestrian facilities, and deterring illegal racing. We did not sign in opposed to legislation since our last meeting. And that takes us to a quick discussion over a couple policies. I'll start with the same flag that the bill tracker stated position in the packet is the recommended position by the legislative work group and is considered acknowledged by council after this discussion unless you want to pull out any for further conversation. Starting with Blake, the 5536 is still the primary vehicle for the Supreme Court's Blake decision fix that the legislature attempted to address a couple of years ago. This bill had its public hearing in committee yesterday. As I mentioned last time, we still expect more changes to the details as it goes, but assume that knowing possession of controlled substances will be a gross misdemeanor with off-ramps from jail sanctions and criminal record paths for those that accept substance use disorder treatment options. On missing middle, Bateman's 1110 had a public hearing last week and is scheduled for an executive session tomorrow. There are no amendments currently posted to the legislature's website, but we still anticipate further changes to this policy. One of the major housing bills that, one of the other major housing policy bills that is still moving is Senator Leas's transit-oriented development bill, 5466. Puget Sound Regional Council released maps last week that overlay the maximum impact areas of this planned high-capacity transit in the region with the areas that this bill, or with the radius that would be impacted by under this bill. That definitely tracked a lot of engagement by cities and legislators to ensure that they're hitting the right balance to encourage transit-oriented development without unintended displacement of marginalized communities. This bill was scheduled for an executive session this afternoon, but that meeting was canceled as members continue to meet and discuss options for this bill. And then as City Manager teed up, vehicular pursuits has seen some drastic changes from our last meeting. Last we spoke, the two House bills were still alive and their chances weren't looking particularly good. Then on the last day of cutoff for the House of Origin, the Senate pulled some drastic procedural motions with a very unique bipartisan group to bring Senator Lovick's version of the bill 5352 to the floor for a vote. Senator Dingra brought forward the amendment that was ultimately adopted. This version, as it passed out of the Senate, is seen as a strong middle ground proposal, which was reflected in the very mixed bipartisan vote for and against. Of note, the current version lowers the evidentiary threshold that a person in the vehicle has that the current version lowers the evidentiary threshold required for engaging in a vehicular pursuit from probable cause to reasonable suspicion that a person in the vehicle has committed or is committing specific criminal offenses that include a violent offense, sex offense, vehicular assault offense, escape offense, DUI, or domestic violence in the 1st through 4th degree offenses. This threshold is higher than the blanket reasonable suspicion threshold that existed prior to the legislature raising it to probable cause a few years ago. Pursuits are also limited to situations in which the subject of the pursuit poses a serious risk of harm to others, and that not pursuing the vehicle would be of greater risk to the community than the pursuit itself. Pursuits may also only be performed by officers trained to perform pursuits, and the amendment contains language regarding supervisor control of pursuits. These changes make the proposal fairly in line with Kirkland's own pursuit policy as it existed prior to the change of the legislature. Due to this, our subject matter experts recommended a position of support, which was a change from their previous monitor recommendation, which does bring me to some of what I mentioned last time, was that occasionally our subject matter experts do recommend position changes based on policy changes to bills as they're amended throughout the session. Some other examples of bills that have had recommended policy changes that the legislative work group supported was 5466, the Promoting TOD bill, which was changed from support with modifications to support. 1134, which is the 988 Behavioral Health Crisis Responder bill, which was changed from support with modifications to support. And 5290, Consolidating Local Permit Review Processes, which was changed from support to support with modifications. And with that, that's what I have for you tonight. As always, happy to answer any questions you have and turn it back to you.
Questions? Councilmember Curtis, you want to?
Kick us off. I'm back. I just want to always thank the work group for their teamwork and flexibility. We decided on Monday to testify on HB 33 tomorrow, and Councilmember Black kindly agreed to testify at 8 in the morning, and this is how hard your team's working for you. So we did want to elevate vehicular pursuit because I knew council would be very interested in this bill. We have been watching it very, very closely. We recommend switching our position to support. Our legislators and our chief are supporting this bill. Chief Harris did reach out to Senator Dingra to thank her for her floor amendments. As Diana said, it strikes a good balance between community safety and pursuits for reasonable suspicion for pretty serious crimes of violent felony, domestic violence, sexual assault, and vehicular assault. I did talk to the chief on Monday. My understanding that, as Diana said, this is more restrictive than our previous police pursuit policy, and that we do train our officers in both intervention techniques and EVAC, which is emergency vehicle operator course. So, and we also had previously required and will continue to require supervisor approval for pursuits. I do, on a personal note, do want to add that I personally am disappointed that the bills that were interested in a long-term study didn't go forward. I asked the chief about that. She did say that KPD does not engage in many pursuits, but we are seeing an increase in people fleeing traffic stops. So we have created a new clearance code so that KPD will be tracking that data of how many people are not stopping or fleeing after they have been stopped. So the work group does recommend that we switch our position to support, and I want to see if any other members have anything to say.
Go ahead, Councilmember Black.
Diana and Councilmember Curtis did such a nice job of describing 5352, the vehicular pursuit bill, and framing it up. I guess I would just add my support for us moving this to the support agenda for all the reasons said. And just as a reminder, this is a floor striker amendment by Senator Dingra. our very own Chair of the Law and Justice Committee. And although it comes to us with sort of unusual procedural measures, our subject matter experts have suggested that we support, and our delegation in Olympia generally supports the bill. So,
Agree, and additional comments. Councilmember Pascal and Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you. Thanks for updating us on this this bill. I know it's been one that I've been tracking and following, so pleased to see that we're able to support it. Councilmember Curtis, something that you mentioned, saying that the chief and the KPD are going to be tracking this in our community in terms of the number of vehicles that flee. I guess the city manager, I'm hoping that that type of information could be included in the quarterly police dashboard. I'm wondering if that's information, and maybe the deputy chief could respond. Is that information that might be okay to document in the quarterly report?
Absolutely, council member. We can definitely include that in the quarterly reports coming forward. We have that clearance code in place, and we can start tracking that much more accurately now.
Great. Thank you.
Super. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Diana and KPD, for reviewing this bill, and thank you to the Legislative Work Group for bringing forth this recommendation. I really appreciate, Diana, that you've addressed tonight some of the questions that I submitted earlier around defining reasonable suspicion and around the details of what types of suspected offenses would allow a police vehicular pursuit. Gosh, this is such a complicated issue that I can only imagine how incredibly challenging it is for law enforcement officers to make a risk assessment on the fly, among many other decisions that officers need to make on the fly. You know, the officers need to weigh the risks of injury and loss of life to themselves and innocent bystanders against potentially protecting those in immediate danger due to the person fleeing. That's why, you know, I share Councilmember Curtis's personal concern. I think it's unfortunate that the state legislature didn't decide to support a bill that would have initiated a study of police pursuits so that these types of risk assessments can be better informed, keeping everybody safer. And without such a study to inform a decision on this matter, I just can't lend my support of Kirkland supporting this bill. I do, however, really appreciate Chief Harris offering to track and share data of folks fleeing traffic stops, and I'd also like to add tracking all of our police vehicular pursuits highlighted in those that data as well. I know that's something that is a rare occurrence here in Kirkland, but I think as this is something that the community has a lot of interest in, just would like to have that reported as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question for Deputy Chief. Do we currently get any data on how often somebody who flees a traffic stop or whatever is subsequently contacted because we had their license number and we could go to that house or something like that? How often do these situations where somebody flees get resolved later by whatever means?
Thank you for that question. I don't have a percentage. Obviously, a lot of these are in stolen vehicles, and so the license plates don't really do us much good. We recover the stolen vehicle somewhere in the region. Usually there's several reports that are tied together, interagency cooperation with detectives that are following up on these types of things. In some of the cases, we know who the driver is, and then we will follow up often with our PROACT team and try to follow up and arrest them at a later date. So we do have some success with that, but many of these are stolen vehicles, and they're pursuing because they know no one can chase them right now.
Thank you. And so that's an additional data element that I would be interested in seeing, is not just how many flee, but how it ultimately is resolved or not resolved and what that data is. Because, and it would be nice to have that statewide. It would be nice to have the study that was proposed, because maybe it could have included this. But that would help us understand the scope of the problem. And does it work to use alternative means to apprehend people? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like somebody needs to put together some kind of tracking for, in addition to the dashboard. So do we need to see if there are enough head nods to move forward to a support? Yeah. Okay. Then we will change our status to support. And I think that's it, right?
Diana, are you not going to talk about the capital budget?
Super exciting news.
Because that's good news.
The council revenue, or the Washington State's Revenue Forecast Council released their budget estimates, or their revenue estimates, on Monday, with some like mixed, things are not super horrible, but things aren't super great sort of forecasts as we expected them to release. But that morning, the Senate released their capital budget, which included a full request for the Kirkland Performance Center and just over $500,000 for the hot crossing, which is super exciting. So the first big hurdle is crossed with like great success. We'll be staying tuned for the House to release their version next week, as that will be the next big hurdle, and then making sure that whatever final deal is worked out between both chambers includes our projects in them. But great first sign that our projects made it in, especially the KPC being in there with a request of over $1 million is pretty atypical for the capital budget. So to have the full request in there is a great first step. So very excited to see that in there, and thank you for the reminder to include that.
Okay, I think we are done. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.
That takes us to our next agenda item, which is the special events program updates. Take us home on this one. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, we're hoping for final action, although there might be a few short amendments. But to give us that presentation is our Deputy Director of Parks and Community Services, John Lloyd.
Good evening, Council. Just give me a second to get the slideshow started and get screen share, which always takes longer than you think it will. Okay. Get my notes page back up. Okay. Thank you, City Manager Triplett. Good evening, City Council. Tonight, I have a very, very short presentation to continue our discussion about special events. For the sake of time, I'm not going to review all of our previous discussions, but rather will focus on the changes and updates since our last discussion in February. As City Manager Triplett just mentioned, it is our hope that we have addressed all your questions and concerns and that you will approve Ordinance 04842, which provides updates to the Kirkland Municipal Code 1924 related to special events. So jumping right into things, at our last meeting in February, there were a few additional changes requested by various council members. I'm going to summarize those various actions on the next couple slides, and then we can jump into any questions that you all may have. There was a question about event scheduling and prioritization, which is addressed in KMC 1924.050. Councilmember Nixon and Deputy Mayor Arnold requested an additional criterion related to tourism and economic development be added. We've added the criterion shown here, which states the event will generate a positive economic impact by attracting out-of-town visitors to Kirkland and increasing visitor expenditures in Kirkland. Additionally, Councilmember Curtis requested the rules be expanded to allow for more than just beer or wine at special events, for things like a whiskey tasting event, for example. Upon further review, the special occasion license required to serve alcohol at special events already allows for spirits to be sold. Historically, the city has interpreted beer and wine as a generic term, which include for alcohol, and special events have been allowed to include one signature cocktail in addition to beer and wine. To ensure there's no misinterpretation of the code, we do recommend changing any reference to beer and wine gardens to alcohol service areas or slight variants of that, which are outlined in the ordinance. Last time we had this conversation, there was a lot of concern over the impact of the proposed fee structure, specifically on some of those events that are funded by the city, which are free to attend. In the memo, I outlined several of the recommendations that you all made. And after further consideration, rather than introducing several new criteria or trying to really shoehorn in a different fee schedule for certain organizations, we recommend that any additional park use fee discounts be included in a separate agreement with the city. This is addressed in KMC 1924.190, which is shown on the screen. Essentially, it states that the fees can be waived if there's a separate agreement that says so. So hopefully that's straightforward and addresses that concern. We previously presented updates to the code related to penalties for violation. The intent of these edits was to provide a little bit more flexibility for staff to hold the event organizers accountable to meet the conditions of the permit. Upon further review, the changes actually did not comply with the state statute on monetary penalties. So we have updated the recommendation, which retained the original intent, but is written in a manner that complies with this statute. So our laws are legally compliant. And then finally, an earlier proposal, we had suggested eliminating community program from the definition, from the events defined in the KMC. That was due to that cycle's recommendation related to event limits. However, with the most recent and current proposal related to event limits, we do want to maintain this definition in there because community programs are exempt from the overall limit for events. In addition to keeping this in the code, we actually also update recommending it to provide greater clarity that these are ongoing events more than just 1 or 2 times. So we've added typically at least 4 weeks in duration to this definition. So those are the changes since our last time. I'm happy to answer any questions about our fixes or changes, or I can continue on to the ordinance and potential amendments and discuss the next steps if you'd like.
Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, to start, I'd like to move approval of ordinance 4842.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Black to approve ordinance 4842. Discussion, Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So over the weekend, after reviewing the packet, I had several questions for staff regarding event timelines and service level commitments and those sort of things. And it was explained that many of these things are addressed in other process documents and not directly in the code. So that I was fine with that. But that left me with 3 very short amendments, which I sent out earlier today.
And the first one on the screen too.
Thank you. So the First Amendment, I noticed that Section 6C spoke about the special event service team in kind of a way of explaining why it exists as opposed to stating what it does. And so I proposed amending it to change was established to ensure to ensures, and instead of saying to collaborate, to change it to collaborates. And so that's the First Amendment. The Second Amendment.
You want to move that amendment?
No, I'm going to move them all at once to save time. Because I think they're non-controversial. If anybody wants to move to divide, they can move to divide. The Second Amendment is just a simple wording cleanup. Instead of date/venues, it spells out dates and venues. And a couple places where there's a 1 in parentheses after first, just replaces that with day. So it says first day of the month in both places. And then the Third Amendment, the previous language said that it would be approved, it had to be approved by any involved city department. And that could be interpreted as meaning only one of several that need to approve it. And so I'm proposing to amend that to say that all involved city departments have to approve in order for the permit to be deemed complete. So I would like to move approval of these 3 amendments.
Second.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Black, the 3 amendments. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion, nay? Noes? Okay, fine. Motion carries unanimously. The question is on the amended motion.
There was one other amendment presented by Councilmember Falcone.
Oh, there was. I'm sorry. I missed that one. Go ahead. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first, I just want to say, wow, we've been working on this for quite some time. So thank you so much, Director Lynn Zwagstra, Deputy Director John Lloyd, and Sudi for all of your hard work on this and for your patience with us as we continue to have feedback even tonight. This looks great. We've made a lot of progress. I just have a few minor pieces of feedback. I will start by making a motion for an amendment, and then I have 2 other just minor pieces of feedback. I also, like Councilmember Nixon, think this is a very non-controversial amendment. My amendment, most of it is on the screen, but there was also stuff recommended, some cleanup of other criteria that were on there to add the word "the." I have to look at my email to see what that was.
It was in this same section, items 3 and 4, just stated event, yada, 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 and the rest of them say the event. So that's what the
So
clarification
just for
is. It's just,
consistency, staff had asked that I also include adding "the" at the beginning of items 3 and 4 in addition to this. And just to pull up my notes here, I really like the criteria we've developed for evaluating special event applications. And this is the 5th bullet here. I like this, and I want to be sure that it doesn't become just a check the box criteria that, like, you know, you gave a small token donation and you get points for this. I really think it should be the extent of that. That said, I really want to make sure that my intent here is clear, that it's not to let larger events that can afford to donate a greater dollar amount to gain more of an edge here, rather that it's considered in proportionality to the event. So in other words, like a $1,000 donation from a small event is much more extensive than a $1,000 donation from a very large event. So that's a little bit nuanced, but I just want to make sure that intent is clear here, that we consider the size and proportionality of that. So I move that we amend criteria items 3 and 4 to add the word "the," and then at the beginning, and then also the language here, the extent to which is added at the beginning of criteria number 5.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Nixon, to accept the Falcone amendments. All those, discussion.
I just wanted to say I appreciate you bringing this forward. It did previously read like it was a simple yes or no question. And the fact is that all of these criteria are subjective and discretionary on behalf of the staff, and they're guidelines that the council is giving to the staff in how to prioritize different events that are asking for the same event at the same venue on the same date. And so I appreciate you bringing this forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Question is on the motion, moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Nixon, to add the Falcone amendments to Ordinance 4842. All those in favor, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
I will also second that comment from Councilmember Nixon. I appreciate Councilmember Falco bringing that up, because that is a great clarification that it is to the extent that they support the nonprofit.
Thank you, John.
Just check the box.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I really like where we've landed on the 2-month application window starting 13 months out. I like that we're moving away from a first come, first serve approach, which, as we know, was not equitable. And given that our intent here is to be fair and to encourage new and diverse events in our city, let's be sure to publicize this. It'd be great to announce it perhaps in the near future that we've made this change. And then again, when it's almost 13 months from the start of peak event season. And let's also tie into that messaging that we have dedicated funding for diverse community events. We want to be inclusive here, so let's avoid industry jargon around events planning because we want to welcome new event organizers that may not know terminology. So I just want to make sure that the way that we say it is really clear. We want new folks to organize diverse cultural events in Kirkland. So I'm really excited for this. And then my third piece of feedback on this tonight is that I just want to confirm that we're moving away from allowing only one mixed drink per event. I know that's been the policy. I know this ordinance is very open, right? It doesn't specify, but that's been our practice and policy, is my understanding, is that we've only allowed one mixed drink per event. And I just want to make sure that that we update our policy if needed to reflect that. And that's it. Thank you, and well done.
Okay, question is on the motion to approve ordinance 4842 as amended, moved by Councilmember Nixon, seconded by Councilmember Black. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Nixon?
Yes.
Councilmember Black?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Falcone?
Yes.
Councilmember Pascal?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Mayor Sweet?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. This takes us to the next and final item, which I believe is Resolution 5581, expressing support for King County's RE+ pledge to minimize solid waste. Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you. I think first someone other than me should move adoption of the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Arnold. Discussion, Councilmember Nixon.
Thank you. Yeah, I support almost everything that's in this RE+ pledge, and would have no problem voting for this resolution if the RE+ pledge and its explanatory information was focused on preserving landfill space and not wasting resources. The fact is, the document is just pervaded by information about climate change and CO2 emissions, which I don't think is the point of this. And you all know I'm a climate change skeptic. At least I'm skeptical that reductions in CO2 emissions are going to make any difference in the climate. And so I intend to vote no on this resolution. Just wanted that to be in the record, which is why I asked for it to be pulled.
Thank you. Question is on the motion to approve Resolution 5581, moved by Councilmember Falcone, seconded by Councilmember Arnold. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 6-1. Okay, I believe that takes us to council reports. And I think I'll start with Deputy Mayor Arnold tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one thing that I wanted to highlight is Councilmember Black and I heard from Cub Scout Pack 550, who we had made a presentation to earlier in the year, that recently did a 2-hour cleanup at Houghton Beach Park, where the scouts picked up lots of glass and trash, especially among the rocks. And I wanted to acknowledge their work and thank them for that service project.
Thank you. Councilmember Pascal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple quick things, just to kind of update on. This past weekend was beautiful, and had the opportunity to go on a bike ride for the East Rail helped organize, and got to talk proudly about all the great things that Kirkland's doing. That was fun. And then before that, get up early and throw out the first pitch, the Little League with the mayor. So that was a great time too. So.
He threw 2 strikes.
I wasn't. You're right. So maybe I was
First
cheating a
one you
little
were,
bit.
yeah.
It still was.
You're a good 10 feet in front.
You learn to do that, after the time that you do it from the mound and it goes over the little kid's head. Yeah, that happened to me last time. And then on terms of the regional committees, Kimberly sent out a summary from the Regional Transit Committee last week. I think just the only thing I'd highlight is that if you haven't looked at it, it is a nice PowerPoint slide deck of the K-Line update. So if you're interested in that, they had a great presentation on the status of the K line. The one thing that we should just be aware of is that as they're finalizing the 10% design, they'll be coming to us and the King County Council to reach agreement on kind of those key design elements that we need to agree to, and Bellevue as well. So that will be coming in 2024. And then next meeting, be a really couple interesting topics around the service recovery plan. And because we do still have some transit service that hasn't fully been reestablished since COVID. And then an update on the electrification and zero emission fleet plan. So two topics that I know members are very interested in. And then finally, Metro does have a new general manager who was appointed by the county executive, and she is more than willing to come and introduce herself to the cities in the county. And so I was just wondering if the council would be interested at some point to fit her in as special presentation, perhaps in one of the future meetings. Okay. I think the things to talk about perhaps would be Zero Youth Fair, an update on that. The Metro Flex, which is the new rebranded on-demand service that provides service up in Juanita area, and then obviously the K-line could be potential topics that she could address. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say, well done tonight, Council. Let's start off with that. Got a lot of good work done. Just a few quick updates. Had a great SCA board meeting last week. We had a robust discussion around the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's 5-year plan. We had also a really great discussion around potentially updating the mission, vision, and values of the Sound Cities Association based on the DEIB Cabinet's recommendations of adding language around equity to those. So more to come on that. I am sure others will likely speak on this, but what an honor it was to be present for the announcement of the Crisis Center last week. Was that 2 weeks ago? Really well done, Mayor Sweet, in your remarks, and fantastic job to staff, in welcoming everybody here. It was a really proud moment for Kirkland. I was so proud of our city, proud of our staff, proud of our council, proud of our community. I'm proud of our partnerships with neighboring cities and King County and the state. It just really was a really wonderful moment for Kirkland to shine. So well done, everybody. Tomorrow, there's going to be the first meeting of the Association of Washington Cities DEIB Cabinet. So I'm really looking forward to that. Next Thursday, for our men colleagues here up on the dais, I'm not sure if you're aware that your women colleagues are going to be a part of a fantastic effort that leaders in Kirkland City staff are working on putting together a fantastic Kirkland Women's Leadership Summit, and the three of us are going to be on a panel during the morning of that. We are so honored and so excited to be a part of it, and from what I hear, there's just a fantastic list of folks who signed up for it. It's going to be a really amazing, amazing event. So thank you to everyone for all your hard work on that. I'm really excited. And I think that's all that I'll report on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Curtis.
All I have is GMPC is tomorrow, where I hope we approve the Affordable Housing Committee recommendations. And Ramadan starts tomorrow, so I wish all of those who observe an easy fast.
Excellent. Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first, I just want to let anyone who's tuning in know that the men on the council did know about the Women's Leadership Summit. So that's first thing. I really appreciate Deputy Mayor Arnold mentioning our wonderful Boy Scout troop. And I do have, from a regional report standpoint, I do have an upcoming meeting of the Regional Law, Safety, and Justice Committee. We meet every month. I don't always provide the council an update on what's discussed there. But this will be an interesting meeting. Chief Padilla from Kent, Chief of Police Padilla from Kent will be providing a legislative update, which is not something I've seen before. So I'll report back, probably starting with the legislative work group, on what I hear from that and the discussion that the members of that committee have around that. That's Thursday, so that's just in time for our legislative work group meeting on Friday. And just worth mentioning to K4C, we outreach committee during the session, it really is focused on legislation that is of interest to the member cities of K4C, member cities and counties of K4C. And just so y'all know, our staff, Diana, and our staff has a backdoor connection with K4C. So our legislative work group is constantly being updated with the priorities of K4C. So I hadn't mentioned that before. Thought it was worth mentioning now. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Nixon.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. And all I have very quickly is we did hold the final meeting of the wastewater stakeholders governance meeting that was done by the University of Oregon in conjunction with Seattle Utilities. The recommendations are being considered. I think I offered, if anybody wants to see that report, it's very long, but it's very interesting. So if anybody does want to see it, I don't suspect that I'm going to see the county selling the West Point to the city of Seattle, but that is one of the suggestions that came out of the report. MUPEC or MISWAC meeting we had last week, and I think Jenna did send out the minutes already. And then I just wanted to ask, I know we still haven't formalized this, but in regard to Samantha's retiring from the Chamber of Commerce, Councilmember Curtis reminded us that we probably need to do something to honor her service. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we use one of our coins for outstanding service and honor her at our next meeting with some level of proclamation in appreciation for her service for 10 years. So we'll go ahead and try and get that arranged. Thanks very much. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, City Manager.
Okay, thank you. I have just a quick rapid fire things. The first is, as you may have seen, we posted the Racer Executive Board officially hired our new director, and we have posted on our website. She started yesterday at the end of the day. She's now fully on, and we're very excited to be moving forward with that, Brooke Bettner. And happy to answer any questions about that, but that was a unanimous decision by the board last Thursday. Secondly, I know all of you got lots of emails about this, but there was considerable nighttime noise happening because of the 405 on-ramp work. Wanted to let you all know that we've been working with WashDOT and their subcontractors on that, and our conclusion was, because this work continues to extend out, that we're ceasing the night work. We've suspended that, and now we're moving to daytime work. While that is going to be better for the community, it is actually going to create some traffic backups on around Northeast 132nd. So just we think it's a very good trade-off, and we're going to try to get it done as quickly as possible, but we just make sure you knew we did cease all night work, and we're not going to take it back up again. And then related to that, as you know, part of the work also created sewage overflow into our creek, Juanita Creek, which has happened several times now, and I wanted to make sure the council did know that we are pursuing our enforcement action as we would with any other person who did something similar, and so we'll be doing enforcement and fines commensurate with what the code allows based on the type of flow that happened. And then finally, on that note, I really want to thank Kelly Jones, who worked really hard with the King County Public Health Department to get extra samples taken so that we could reopen that beach over this weekend, which was a sunny, beautiful day. And so we actually were all the way into the very end. And at 6 o'clock on Friday night, she was able to get clearance that we were actually able to reopen the beach so that the public could enjoy it over the weekend. So just want to thank Kelly and her surface water team and the water quality team as well. So any questions on all that before I go to calendar?
I don't see any.
Okay. One other note, again, I think some of you saw this, but as you might know, King County has ceased service to the South Kirkland Park and Ride as part of their normal service change. That change happened at the end of this weekend. Over this weekend, we, the city of Kirkland, put up temporary fencing around the park and ride, and King County put ecology blocks over all the entrances. So the decision to end service there was not made by Kirkland. It was made by King County. And we're continuing to work with WashDOT on a purchase of the site. So we hope to have more information for you soon. But they continue to be working with the Federal Highway Administration to get final approval. So more to come on that. But if you do get questions about why there's a temporary fence, the city of Kirkland did put that up to prevent things from happening there. And the county is still the group that is maintaining that in partnership with WashDOT, because we certainly don't yet own it. So much more to come. So, but any questions on that?
Just one.
Go ahead.
You might clarify. I think you mentioned South Kirkland Park and Ride, but I think
I'm sorry,
you meant to say
apologize.
Houghton Park and Ride.
Oh, I meant to
just
say
for
Houghton
those
Park.
listening, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I meant to the Hope Park. Thank you. All right, then finally I have 2 items. I have the King County Metro General Manager for a special presentation at a future council meeting, and then the Samantha St. John proclamation. Are there any other calendar events that the council wants to adjust tonight?
I don't see any.
Okay, that's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Excellent. And we do not have an executive session
We do not.
for a change. Well, I just want to thank you all. This has been a very important meeting. Jim, again, thank you so much for helping us through a very long process. But thanks so much to this council for coming to consensus.